Good evening, everybody. How you guys doing tonight? Glad you guys can join us back here on the Wisconsin Conservative Conversations as we do each and every week. Each of these interviews, I like to bring on new guests so that way we can talk about their race, what they're about, and of course, we want to bring a human element to this because I find it to be informative to bring this type of information out to the public because you guys get to see candidates on the trail, you hear a speech, you get a news clip. That's all fine and good. But to hear an actual conversation, that's where I think a lot of information can be gleaned from our candidates. And one of the things as we enter into this primary here, into the final leg, 29 days, less than a month, we are 4 weeks, 1 day away from August 9. And there are primaries all over the place, up and down the ticket. Tonight, we're going to focus here on the 23rd Senatorial District here in Wisconsin. And I'm going to bring on our guest here, and I got a story to tell once he comes on. I want to bring on Brian Westrate, who's a candidate for that 23rd Senatorial District. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Ed. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you. I want to start with a little tale here because when I think our first contact was sometime at the end of last summer, and I was having some displeasure with my county party, and we're still working on it, growing things as it were. But one of the things that I recall doing is I posted something, and there was yourself, and there was another young gentleman, and it was almost simultaneously. You both hit me up with a contact number. And I remember having this conversation with you where you were like, listen, you can easily, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, you can certainly rail on about it, or you can join the county party and try to influence it from within. And I found that to be some of the most enlightening advice that I got this election cycle. And I know I talked to you about it during convention, but I want to publicly thank you for that bit of advice as well here on the show.
Well, you are most welcome. I thank you for being engaged, right? And being focused on the goal, which is effective activism. I mean, that's it. I think it's easy to forget what the goal is here. The goal is the defense of liberty, whether it's working within a county party, working with a candidate, doing podcasts like yourself, just getting the word out for people. But the goal is the defense of liberty and
Right.
defeating those who would take it, right? It's easy to get lost in the noise, but it's a lot easier to just focus on the goal.
Well, I found that, and I've been doing this podcast game here for quite some time, like going on like 7 years now. And on the onset, it literally was me going off about X, Y, and Z, talking about things that in retrospect, I can see that I was definitely half cocked on. It became something else entirely different where I focused on the relationships with candidates and focusing on issues, especially laser focusing on a state level. And it really opened a lot of doors in the sense that it gave a greater understanding for myself and hopefully for my listening audience as well.
Yeah. I mean, and I really applaud, because I followed you for a while, right? And I really applaud what you've done. See, for me, you are truly a success story, being somebody who got engaged, right? And started dealing with the issues, started interacting with them, started learning about them and creating a worldview and an understanding and whatnot. And you've been willing to grow and mature in your understanding as you've done this. And so often we'll see people that get engaged like yourself and just get intractable, right? And just, refuse to acknowledge that there's more to a story than they originally thought, or you know what I mean? To go look and see the man behind the curtain. And so I applaud what you've done and the difference you're making.
Well, I tell you, I rejoice in being wrong. And I rejoice in it because, well, if we're going to discuss issues, you're either going to reaffirm what I already know, or if I'm wrong, you help me grow as a person. I can't help but thank you for that. That's a beautiful thing. And that's what I'm hoping to at least bring forward when we talk about these discussions. But we don't want to hear about me. I mean, I'm interesting, but I'm not that interesting. Yeah. You, sir, are running for this 23rd Senatorial District, and you cover a very interesting area. Marshfield, Chippewa Falls area, 3 assembly districts, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And you yourself, a native of Wisconsin, I always start off with this type of question. Why get involved when because you literally have to put your life on hold? What makes you run for a Senate office?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And just briefly, the 23rd state Senate seat covers all of of Eau Claire County except the city of Eau Claire, basically. There's some small portions of it. Then all of Chippewa County, all of Clark County. It picks up Marshfield, Spencer, Abbotsford, Colby in Marathon County, picks up the city of Marshfield in Wood County, picks up Black River Falls in Jackson County, and then picks up 3 townships in northeastern Dunn County. So it's a big kind of
A lot
oddly
of
shaped district.
territory.
The 67th, 68th, and 69th assembly districts are all within the Senate district. As you know, 33 state Senate seats, 99 assembly districts. So there are 3 assembly districts that evenly match each state Senate seat.
Right.
The reason I'm running is because this is who God made me. I wish He had given me a heart for something else. A lot of times, right? You get a lot more pats on the back, a lot fewer middle fingers. But I believe that politics matters because so many of the problems we care about as men and women of faith, or just as citizens, as community members, as neighbors, have a governmental cause, right? And so getting the government out of the way, reforming government, changing government will be part of the solution. And I think if we don't have men and women with a grounded worldview, a constitutional conservative mindset, a viewpoint that puts the people first, we're going to continue to have bad government and bigger government and more intrusive government. And look, I wish I were ignorant a lot of the times, right, of the issues, because I'm sure ignorance is bliss, but I'm
Blue
not.
pill.
Exactly. I know what's going on, and I know the damage it's doing to the American family and to the American fabric. And I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. I can't afford to not fight the darkness, right? I believe that I'm a person of faith, and I believe Scripture is clear that we're supposed to fight the darkness. And I just, all that evil needs to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Another saying that I love that's written actually on the wall at my YMCA here in Eau Claire, it reads, I must do something always gets more done than someone should do something, right? And so it matters too much. The American experience matters too much. Liberty matters too much. The state of Wisconsin matters too much for me to sit back and not take action. And so for 22 years, I've been a political activist. Okay, I've been making a difference, helping men and women win office. And here's what happened: is 2 years ago, as you know, COVID hits, and we had a governor that violated the Constitution in the most egregious way possible. Yes. When he told pastors they couldn't open their doors, parishioners they couldn't go to church, and decided which small business got to live and which died. Private property violated in the worst way. And nobody did anything. Okay, we have 82 members of the Republican legislature, many of whom are my friends, most of whom are my friends.
Right.
But still, not a single press conference saying, hey, we just want the people to know we're upset that the governor is violating your constitutional rights. I saved the emails from that period. They all ended with, here's how you wash your hands, like I'm 4 years old. Mm-hmm. And not a single one said, Brian, we want you to know we are just as upset as you are, and we're going to do everything we can to defeat this tyrant, right? Nothing. Crickets. And so coming out of that, I knew early on that the COVID era was not what it was painted to be. Look, it's a real pandemic, it's a real illness. I got it. It was terrible. It killed one of my best friends. Okay, I'm not saying it isn't. But the way the government interacted with it was so egregious. And it was clearly the left seeking to gain power. Again, Rahm Emanuel never let a crisis go to waste.
Correct.
And Donald Trump was their devil of all devils. And so I just knew early on that the government response to COVID was not what it should have been, was not actually going to be efficacious in the end. And yet nobody was doing anything about it. So fast forward, finding out that everyone knew my state senator was going to retire.
Right.
It was not a secret. It wasn't a poorly kept secret. It wasn't a secret at all. and so knowing that, I felt God's push, and basically, now is the time. And I think that the federal government, the solution to the federal government is going to be the states. I think that if the American experiment is saved, is going to be from the ground up, from the states up, not from the feds down. And I just want to go be part of the solution. And I'm not Pollyannish yet. I'm not going to suggest that we can solve everything in a 4-year term or anyone's going to hand me a magic wand as a state senator. But what I know is I have a grounded constitutional worldview. And I know there are a handful of folks already in Madison who are friends of mine who also share that worldview. You get enough of us together, we can block bad legislation, we can encourage good legislation, and hopefully we can bring our colleagues alongside us to defend liberty as the primary goal of government.
You said something that I think is so incredibly important, and I asked candidates this very question as well, just because we've seen what has happened over the last 2.5 years now, and depending on the rumblings you're hearing, I'm hearing there's a potential for another lockdown here come this fall. I don't know if I want to necessarily go down that rabbit hole or not, but after the last couple of years, there's not very much I won't believe could potentially happen.
Right.
But with that being said, one of the biggest things we saw was the overreaching on the federal government. You've seen the monetary policy just decimate and devalue our dollar. We've seen, government edict just whether it be from the federal level on state level. And one of the things that I can't help but think about is how do we protect the state of Wisconsin, the people of Wisconsin, from that overreaching federal government? Now, obviously, we protect it on the state level by electing conservative, constitutionally focused, constitutionally minded candidates. But we have that overreaching federal government that likes to tell you, yeah, we're telling you otherwise. And federalism only when we apply it.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue one of the solutions, again, is to send constitutional conservatives to Madison. I have every confidence that we will maintain control in the Assembly and in the state Senate. God willing, knock on wood, we'll have veto-proof majorities. And I'll tell you what, I want a veto-proof majority even with a Republican governor. Okay? Yeah. Because I would like the people's house to ultimately be able to, make the final decision on legislation. And then we need to put a Republican governor in place. We need to put a Republican attorney general in place. And what I would like to see happen, and I think is going to happen, whether it's here in Wisconsin or perhaps in Texas, the petri dish of liberty, perhaps, is a state government telling the federal government, we appreciate your opinion, but we disagree. Mm-hmm. And enforce a constitutional crisis of sorts where we finally have the Supreme Court invoke the 10th Amendment and tell the federal government, yeah, guys, you don't have the power to force the states to do this. Right. The Constitution doesn't give you that right. I would love to see us revisit, for instance, the Commerce Clause, which is basically where so much of the federal government's power comes from.
Correct.
They've I would argue, usurped the right to say, well, if you grow tobacco in South Carolina and if you sell any of that tobacco outside of South Carolina, therefore the federal government can regulate tobacco sales and growth in South Carolina. It's nonsense. There's no way that's what the founders intended, right? And so that's why I say I think the petri dish of liberty are the states. Mm-hmm. And again, we're 246 years into our national history, 170 years into our state's history, approximately. And we've got here by the death of 1,000 cuts, right? I mean, argued maybe 1913 with the creation of the federal income tax and the Federal Reserve, and then FDR's New Deal in the 20s and 30s. Fast forward to the Johnson administration and his war on poverty, which was basically just a let's grow government through welfare program, right? And so it has taken us a long time to get here. One of the things I think that we need, I really encourage constitutional conservatives to understand, is that we're not going to be able to solve it overnight. That we got here a cut at a time. It's going to take time to undo it. The ship of state is an aircraft carrier. It's not a speedboat. All right. When you turn the wheel, it's 4 days later, you're turned around in an aircraft carrier. But we've got to start somewhere. And I would argue that Donald Trump was the catalyst that caused the left to finally own who they are.
Yes.
It caused the Marxists to come out of the woodwork. And they have now embraced that they're crazy. They have now embraced that they're socialists and Marxists, and the truth has no bearing on what they've chosen to believe or do. And we needed that. I mean, I truly think Donald Trump was the disruptor we needed when we needed him.
Correct.
And now we've got people like Ron DeSantis who have been able to, kind of boldly proclaim a conservative worldview. And, Rick Scott and Tim Scott and
Yeah.
Kristi Noem. And so I am hopeful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be running, right? If I thought all was lost, I wouldn't spend my time and treasure doing this. But I'm hopeful that with people like you and I, men and women like us, at the grassroots level, at the state level, that over time we can start to correct the cultural loss of what makes America great.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's an excellent point there because, and I wrote this article several years ago when Trump first got into the primary race, and we're just watching him in the primaries, and it's like, man, it's kind of a zoo here. But at the same time, it was like, it was the bull in the china shop type of thing, and we kind of needed it to shake things up. And I'll be the first one to tell you, wasn't my pick. I was Ted Cruz all day, every day. But obviously, if you're being smart about this, gee, do I really want Hillary to win? No, I ended up voting for Trump. Trump was the prototype. And when I look at someone like a DeSantis, a Tim Scott, I look at some of these other folks, to me, that is the upgrade. That is that next level that's going to be the fighter, but don't have to fight everybody.
Right. I was a Scott Walker guy, then I was a Marco Rubio guy, then I was a Ted Cruz guy, and then once he won the nomination, I was 100% a Trump guy because again, I knew Hillary, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Look,
yes,
almost all of his policies I agreed with. The Roe versus Wade being overturned is a direct result of Donald Trump actually picking conservatives. The first Republican of the last 3 Republican presidents who actually picked conservatives for the Supreme Court, right? Not squishy moderates.
Unapologetically.
And incidentally, he did nothing while he was in office to personally embarrass me. Okay, right. He didn't have sexual relations with a 20-year younger intern while at work, right? He didn't start any wars. So
that's a big one there.
That is a big one. I was very pleasantly surprised, and I served as a presidential elector for Donald Trump in 2016 here for the state of Wisconsin.
Right,
and I had 89,000 emails from people telling me not to vote for him. 3,200 actual pieces of mail delivered to my house. I live in a village of 1,200 people. I was getting mail in 2-foot trays. 200 phone calls from random strangers. Somehow managed to get into an argument with the porn community in California on Twitter. I'm still not quite sure how that happened. I was going to say to be lectured by morality by a woman whose profile picture is her in a schoolgirl costume, right?
It's a strange world we live in.
It is a strange world we live in. And so, but he was who we needed when we needed him. I would argue he is the only Republican who could have beat Hillary on that stage. In the grand scheme of things, with what we know now, he was really, I think, the only one who was going to beat her. And so I'm glad he did. I'm glad he caused the disruption he did, caused the liberals to finally own who they are, and woke up the hardworking middle class who had been voting Democrat because they just hadn't quite noticed that JFK no longer represented the Democrat Party.
Correct.
Right? And JFK and Harry Truman would both be Republicans if they were alive today.
It's true.
So, and like you say, an upgrade. Now I think we can move into this phase where we've got some men and women who have the tenacity and the commitment of Donald Trump with maybe a little bit more of the statesmanship of Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important distinction because you need to have that statesmanship, but you also need that person that's going to be like, all right, time for games is over. When we think about this, and something else you had mentioned too along these lines, you mentioned something about culture. And I think that's really important because it was Andrew Breitbart who stated this before his passing. He mentioned that politics is downstream from culture. And one of the things here in Wisconsin that I've noticed, and obviously nationwide, because the left control the cultural institutions, the right, we essentially abdicate them. We've abdicated entertainment, we've abdicated music, we've abdicated, education from K through 12 to higher ed. Granted, it's not a political answer. This becomes more of a thing for conservative influencers to do something on a certain front. But on the educational side of things, this is where I think we got the biggest opportunity. If you're elected to be a state senator there in the 23rd, How do you see changing that cultural mindset legislatively, politically, through our education system here in Wisconsin?
100%. So I really think you've hit a very important point here. And I'll just share that my brother has his PhD in history, okay, from
Mhm.
Notre Dame. And while he was working on I believe his dissertation, he came across some evidence that the American Communist Party in the 30s realized that it would not be able to convince American adults to be communists. But if they could infiltrate the free and compulsory education system, they could teach children to be. All
Yes.
right. So again, these are people that have been playing the long game.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that our schools are infiltrated by communists. I'm just saying that it has been a long-standing program of the left to infiltrate our schools, okay, and to indoctrinate children. And
Right.
again, you can do that if you're a Marxist because you believe in the state above all else.
Mhm.
Above family and above faith, the state is all that matters. I mean, all you need to do is look at Soviet history to see that, or really any communist nation's history.
Correct.
So, what I would like to see happen here in Wisconsin is we need competition in the school marketplace. Right? For 100 years, the public schools have had a near monopoly on education. We need a universal school choice program, and that is one of the three things I would like to do day one as a state senator is push universal school choice. And what universal school choice allows is parents who don't otherwise have the money to make a choice that meets their child's educational needs, their family's ideology, and saves the taxpayers money. Because here in the state of Wisconsin, it costs it costs about $13,000 a year on average to educate a child in the public schools.
Right.
Private schools, on average, tuition is less than $4,000 from K through 12.
Wow.
So if you gave parents a $4,000 tax credit, tax rebate that they could use to pay for private school education, the taxpayers would save $9,000 a year. The parents would have a choice for their kids that meets their learning needs and the family's needs. And maybe, just maybe, the competition in the marketplace would force the public schools to realize they should just start teaching and stop indoctrinating, right? Because nothing scares a school district more than losing money.
Correct.
Right? I'm a private sector guy. I've been a small businessman for 22 years, literally since the day I graduated college. I've been a small businessman. And in the private sector, competition forces businesses to provide better products and services at a lower cost. Right? Competition is good.
Yes.
Yet the schools have not had that. So I think we need a universal school choice program in this state for all of the reasons I've mentioned. It is a win-win-win-win-win, unless your goal is to perpetuate the educational industrial complex. Right? If your concern are the schools themselves, the system itself, well, then the problem is you're not focusing on the children. Schools are supposed to be about children. They're not supposed to be about teachers, and they're not supposed to be about administrators or buildings or control. They're supposed to be about kids. So if we can refocus on what's best service of children, then we will push a universal school choice in this state and finally start providing some competition and some choice to the people of Wisconsin.
Well, and I think, you have a form of school choice, as it were, when it comes to the collegiate system, because you can pick whatever university you're going to go to, so long as you can afford it. But one of the things that I think about when we're talking about school choice, when we're talking about, okay, how much it costs to educate a kid, is the top-heavy administrators. And you see this from large school districts all the way up to the collegiate level. And one of the things that always goes through my mind is, why do we have so many people making six-figure incomes, low to mid-tier six-figure incomes, when teaching's supposed to be a calling? And I'm not trying to bash teachers or anything. As a matter of fact, I think they need more support. They need more training. We need people to start going back to STEM, to reading, writing, arithmetic. But why are we spending so much on top-heavy administration?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And you made a point I think is really important to make here. My wife is a public school teacher, conservative, but a public school teacher. Okay. My mother was a public school teacher. My grandmother was a public school teacher and principal in Lansing, Michigan. And my brother is a professor at Villanova, an adjunct professor. Okay. So I have nothing but respect and admiration for those who have chosen to dedicate their lives to teaching. What I want to see happen is I want the state to stop micromanaging, to stop acting like teaching them wokeness is more important than letting them teach reading, writing, arithmetic in their classrooms. And more also, I would argue, another part of this that we have to be talking about is the need to encourage families, to
Mm-hmm.
encourage mothers and fathers living in a home, raising children together. Okay, because you don't have to be a person of faith for this to be true. The
Correct.
statistics bear it out. You want to stop mass murders? Almost every one of the mass shootings has been perpetrated by somebody who comes from a broken home, a very broken home, right?
Correct.
If you want to create well-adjusted adult members of society, almost the best thing you can do is have them grow up in a home with a mother and a father. Now, I'm from a divorced family, twice divorced actually, right? I acknowledge things happen. Life is not perfect, it is messy. But we used to, in this country, at least agree on what the ideal was, right? Because we set a goal. The goal is intact families raising children. And then we dealt with times where we couldn't accomplish the goal.
Correct.
Now we act as if there is no goal. Every possible iteration of living is just as valid and just as relevant as any other possible iteration. And that's nonsense. It is statistically nonsense. It is commonsensically nonsense. And it is nonsense from anyone who's actually lived life. We have PhD professors telling Congress they can't identify what a woman is. Actually, new members of the Supreme Court can't tell us what a woman is.
Right? I saw that.
It's absurd. And this is leftists. This is a leftist worldview gone awry, run amok, right? Yeah. And we have to stop letting them control our educational systems. We have got to stop, to your point, we've got to stop having top-heavy administration. People are getting paid so much money they have to justify their position by forcing rank-and-file teachers to spend hours of their life in training that is useless for actually teaching children how to read, write, or do arithmetic.
Right.
We have to stop promoting ideology in our schools. We've got to stop indoctrinating and begin educating again. And as I say, we have to give material support to our teachers by encouraging families to stay together and to raise children in that environment. Under the Great Society, Johnson's Great Society, where we disincentivized families, right? That guy was an SOB of the highest caliber.
Oh, that he was.
He ruined, purposefully sought to destroy the American family. And you and I are living the results of it as we're seeing mass shootings and broken children from broken homes being sent to teachers, and we're asking them to fix them while they educate them.
Correct.
We've got to stop that as a society. And I think at the state level, I would like us to make some significant reforms to the education system, to what we force teachers to do, the amount of training they have to go through, the amount of wokeism that happens. Let's free our teachers up to just teach our children.
Right.
And not spend hours of their day in mindless training that has nothing to do with educating children.
You know, it's kind of funny. I was just thinking, as we've got these different things, you got CRT, you got SEL, and I'm sure there's several other acronyms, and they want to teach diversity, and hey, look at, little Johnny over there. It's funny. It's like, yeah, I could teach you that. Give me like 2 hours in some Schoolhouse Rock. Oh man, you'd be all coming out here saying Conjunction Junction and Great Melting Pot. It'd be freaking awesome. You said a couple things here that really, really struck. And I want to kind of pivot here because I think this is related to it. When you talk about the breakdown of the family, we know statistically, especially for young males, the propensity for you to get involved into the criminal justice system and not on the correct side is actually statistically very high. And when you take a look at the young ladies, your chances of becoming a single mother pretty quick, statistically very high. But then you look at the out of control crime that's been happening. And I think we've seen it in cycles. Because I remember, especially in the Milwaukee area in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a huge gang problem. Quelled down a bit, kind of kicked back up and gone back and forth. But as we've been seeing a lot of this nonsensical violence, it's not even gang related. I mean, from students assaulting teachers, people randomly playing this knockout game several years ago, armed robbery, violent assaults. You have all kinds of this stuff going on right now. Look what happened down in Waukesha over that Christmas Day, that Christmas parade massacre over there, where this fool just drives through a crowd of people going to a parade, our criminal justice system is broken.
Yeah.
It is one that needs fixing. How do we fix this here? And I know it's almost an unfair question, because I mean, we've been trying to answer that question for as long as there's been people.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Ed, if you're looking for a guy who's going to give you some bumper sticker answer, I'm not your guy. These are complicated questions that have complicated solutions and complicated sources of the problem. I mean, one of the things that you learn in business is if you want to solve a problem, you have to first identify it, right? And so, the left wants us, for instance, to believe that the problem with mass shootings is the gun. You're literally approaching it from the last possible moment of the back end, right? People who commit mass murder become murderers years earlier because of what happens in their life, because of experiences that they've been exposed to and had, because of mental health issues. The shooting is literally the very last part of the problem.
Correct.
And the gun has got nothing to do with it. All right. As you just pointed out with Waukesha, I mean, Nice, France, a guy killed 84 people and wounded 450 something with a box truck. Right. Mm-hmm. Evil is going to do evil if it's evil, if it's intent on it. And so to your point about law enforcement, we have got to start penalizing behavior we don't want to see. Look, I'm a parent. You want your kid to do more of something, you reward them. You want them to do less of something, you penalize them. Right? Do what dad tells you to do, you get an allowance. Don't, you get to sent to your room without supper. Right? And what we've done here in Wisconsin, we'll stick to Wisconsin. What has happened here is you've got liberal district attorneys and some Republican district attorneys, but liberal district attorneys across the state who, and yeah, I mean, okay, so they're letting people out that shouldn't have, but we can go even further back 2 years ago to COVID, where again, government interaction into the marketplace in pursuit of something that didn't work. Okay, Johns Hopkins has said the shutdowns and all the rest of it didn't save lives.
Correct.
So bad government policy based on bad science, based on bad decision by people who couldn't afford to be wrong, forced the court systems to close, essentially, cops to let people out who had no business being out in society, district attorneys not to prosecute people who should have been prosecuted, all for what? Right? And now you've got these Democrat district attorneys who are providing sentences and penalties that are so far away from being commensurate to the crimes that were committed.
Correct.
We've got to get back to penalizing people with a punishment that fits the crime, and actually keeping them in jail, keeping violent offenders locked up until they get their day in court. And then once they get their day in court, having them be sentenced appropriately to the crime that they've committed. We've got to start there, right? Punishment is supposed to be deterrent. That is literally, I mean, Hammurabi's code on up till now.
Correct.
That's the point. The reason we punish people is because we're trying to deter other people from doing the same thing. Well, if there's no punishment for criminal activity, guess what you're going to get more of, right? And again, no simple solution. We go further back to society, to a society that because of liberalism has for generations told people truth is relative.
Right.
That right isn't right and wrong isn't wrong. So you have entire generations of people that don't know what's right and what's wrong. As long as it makes you feel good, that's okay. So it makes me feel good to steal my neighbor's Toyota and drift it around Milwaukee until I crash into a fire hydrant.
Right.
That's okay. And the reason I know it's okay is because it made me feel good and I didn't pay a penalty for it. Even though everyone saw me do it and everyone knows I'm the guy that did it, I pay no penalty, right? We've got to start penalizing again. Look, when my dad, who was 78, was growing up, if a young lady got pregnant unexpectedly as a teenager, she would go move with her aunt for 9 months to help her, take care of a new baby, and then she'd come back. Everybody knew what was going on, but at least there was some social stigma to behavior we didn't want to reward.
Certainly.
Right? And we've lost that. So again, there's no simple solution here, but a couple things we can very easily do with a new Republican governor is get rid of district attorneys that aren't doing their job. And then what I want to see us do, because I don't want to raise taxes, is I want to see us cut government as much as humanly possible and put those funds into the things we all agree should be done, law enforcement being chief among them. We want somebody to put a bulletproof vest on for work every day. We're going to have to pay them more to make that happen. Because right now you can make $45,000 a year folding shirts at Kohl's. All right.
That's true.
So if we want to convince young men and women to dedicate a life to service that involves possibly being shot and beaten and spit on or cut we're going to have to pay them appropriately. I don't want to raise taxes, so that means cutting other areas of government. And look, go for fun sometime, pull up a list of all the departments of government in Wisconsin. It's asinine. The amount of money we spend on stuff that people don't want, don't need, and don't even know is happening is mind-boggling, right? So I am a guy that I want to get to Madison, and I want to cut government. I want to limit government. I want to say no to more government. I want to be able to be on the show with you a year from now bragging about the number of bills I didn't pass.
See, and I'm so glad you said that, because you oftentimes, I think during election cycles, I'm going to go do this. I would love to see somebody come and it's like, listen, I'm going to run for this office, and I intend on passing nothing. Like, I'm going to extract every spending bill, anything that looks ridiculous. If you got some pork in here and I like bacon, I'm going to block it. That's my goal. Would love to see someone, like, I don't even know if that person's electable, but I would love. We got somebody who's electable. So they were there.
We'll find out August 9th. But that is my message as I'm going door to door, is that I want to go say no. I want to go cut. Right. And we were talking earlier about schools and about law enforcement. Look, those are public areas. Okay. Public areas are legitimate for government to interact with because they're public areas. They're things we all agree should be done. It's like roads, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to go down and advocate for better roads, because roads are a legitimate function of government that we all agree on. Right. But what I don't want to do is go down and expand DADCAP, right? The regulatory agency of the state. I don't want to go down and encourage, we've got to make sure that women who braid hair have to have 6 months of education and a license. No, just stop. Get out of our business. And look, I've been going door to door, over 2,000 doors so far, talking to voters. I mean, that's just myself, and I've had a team doing more. In the stories I've had, so I'm sitting in Chippewa Falls last week. Gentleman, he and his family own a number of establishments in the area. He's opened up a new one in Eau Claire, and the one code agency said that his plan was fine. He starts building it. The plumber inspector comes in, tells him he has to move a drain, and before he can open, in order to try and capture some of the Christmas rush, right? And nobody's focused on what the actual goal is. The goal is to develop economic prosperity in our community.
Right.
You've got somebody who's trying to open a business and employ people and provide a product and service that the community wants, and government just gets in his way. Dairy breakfast in Greenwood, talking to a young man who wants to buy his family's small herd operation, but he can't afford it because there's a new, and I might get the facts a little bit wrong here because I am not a farmer, okay? But there's a ferrule that connects the milk house to the tank, to the storage tank, and you're grandfathered in if you've got the ferrule now, but if a operation changes hands, the new owner has to retrofit that to a stainless steel welded thing that this young man said cost $22,000.
I was going to say, it would be cost prohibitive.
And he can't afford it. So he can't buy his family's small herd operation. And look, the family farm, the small family farm in this state is already struggling. I mean, and acknowledge larger farms are still family farms. They're just those who have chosen to utilize the benefits that an incorporation offers an operation. Okay. And that's just, it's the way of the world. It's the way the marketplace is going.
Correct.
But I love the small family farm. It's kind of defines Wisconsin and has the whole 44 years I've lived here.
Right.
And so to the extent that we can avoid losing them, let's do that by not putting undue burden and regulatory requirements on those who are seeking to pass their farm from one generation to the next. I mean, so you just don't have to spend much time talking to voters to understand how intrusive government is into our lives. And I want to go to Madison and do everything I can to limit that, to shrink government, not grow it.
Well, and I think you said something really important, because when we think about various issues, if you're amongst what I call the politically initiated, you start hearing things about election integrity, a very important issue. You start hearing things about, Roe v. Wade, very important issue. But what are the real, you've been knocking doors. What are the real kitchen table conversations, the issues that people want you to address? Because somehow my thought process for most people is like, man, that $300 I spent at the grocery store didn't buy me nearly as much as it did last year.
That's 100%. The economy are issues 1 through 10 right now. And let's accept that monetary policy is a federal thing, right? That
Right.
a lot of what we're suffering under is a direct result of federal monetary policy and COVID reaction, right? I mean, the first stimulus bill, God bless them, under President Trump, but then the ARPA funds that came out under Biden. I mean, you cannot dump $3 to $5 trillion into the economy and not have inflation, folks. This is Econ 101.
Correct.
That being said, at the state level, what we can do is we can do what we can to say no to the feds. Okay, this whole notion that it's federal dollars. Well, it's still tax dollars, still money. It doesn't grow on trees. It's not like senators in D.C. are out picking money off the tree.
A lot of people don't seem to understand that that money is leverage against your future labor.
That's exactly right. You are 100% right. Every single dollar of tax money that's spent represents someone's sweat equity, represents an hour, a moment, a second of someone's life. And that's why I am so passionate about fighting taxation and fighting government waste, because I know that every dollar we spent represents a moment you aren't able to spend with your daughter, represents a moment I'm not able to spend with my son in the woods deer hunting, represents a moment someone isn't able to spend with an aging parent or a dying relative. Right? These are moments of life. And for us to waste them in frivolous nonsense is just truly evil. We've got to stop doing that. And at the state level, we can cut regulation, we can cut spending, we can give people the power and the money back, and then focus on doing government well that is government legitimately done. Roads, police, fire, education, right? Control of public lands. I mean, I'd like to see the DNR significantly reformed, right? Because they're basically a small EPA now. They're not counting the deer and making sure that we don't shoot too many bear, right? They've become small EPA. They have to be reformed. The power has to be returned to the people. And like I say, I make no promises. 4 years from now, Ed, we might be talking, and I might be saying, "Hey, Ed, it has been fun, but I'm not running for re-election because the swamp is even worse than I thought."
Correct.
But I'm hoping that's not the case. I know a lot of people. There are a lot of good people in Madison. And I'm hoping I can get down there and use the power of persuasion and the power of my worldview to get others to partner with others who see things similarly. And together we can push good legislation, try and block bad legislation, and make a difference here in Wisconsin.
For sure. I want to pivot here because I feel like we're starting to look more toward the future of Wisconsin. And I'm old enough to remember where the idea was to, hey, you want to go to college, get yourself a degree, and, go do a job and do that for the next 40, 50, 60 years. And I think a lot of people were sold on a bill of goods. Not that there's anything wrong with going to college, but college wasn't for everybody. Do you really need to have a 4-year degree on Indonesian basket weaving? Probably not. I mean, your degree in philosophy, unless you're going to be writing books on it, probably not the smartest move in the world.
You can think deep thoughts about being unemployed.
Right. I got my deep thoughts here with the magic 8 ball.
Yeah.
So, but when I think about so many young people, and even, adults for that matter, I think trade schools. I think, the need for, carpenters and, craftsmen and welders and so many people that, you made the example about regulation. It actually takes you more time to get licensed to be a barber than it does to be an EMT. Like, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
How can we grow? Well, two-part, I guess. How can we grow this, the trades here in the state of Wisconsin, and also retain this vast wealth of knowledge and wonderful people that we have here, rather than seeing this brain drain that we've had over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% right. And it's actually been a soapbox issue of mine for decades. And I have a 4-year degree, business and poli-sci, that's my 4-year degree.
Right.
You and I grew up in an era where basically, again, the educational industrial complex, the counselors in schools just pushed kids to 4-year degrees because that's what the counselors had. That's what every teacher in the building had. Right. And so you had a bunch of people going to 4-year degrees who had just no business doing so. Right. Who didn't need it, didn't want it, didn't fit them. They should have gone to a trade school. They should have gone to tech. They should have gone to schools like Stout here in Menominee, where they teach, a lot of kind of more of the skills-based 4-year degree. And instead, they, to your point, went and got degrees that never should have been allowed to be offered in the first place, at least in the public schools.
Right.
Right. Look, I believe in education. 100%. I love to read. I love American history. But look, I've learned more since I graduated from college than I did in college by reading on my own and because of my own pursuit of knowledge. So I'm not saying that knowledge for knowledge's sake isn't worthwhile. I'm not saying that a college degree can't be worthwhile even if you get a degree that isn't specific to a trade. But to your point, there's so many young men and women who clearly would make excellent electricians, excellent plumbers who love to work with their hands. And Ed, I don't know about you, but I don't know a poor tradesman. No. They're all doing very well. And
let me give you, and I apologize. I got to tell you this story. My stepson, young man, 21 years old, just had his birthday. And he was going to school here in the Westrate County area. And he was also working in conjunction with Fox Valley Technical College for welding. So half the day he's in school, the other half the day he's welding. And this young man at 21 is making, I want to say, he was definitely making plus 40K a year at 21.
Ed, I mean, this is the golden age of mid-20s people, right? If you're willing to work for a living, I'm knocking doors in Tilden, which is, between Chippewa and Bloomer, basically. And I meet a guy who's worked for the garbage company for 34 years. He said a Chippewa Falls garbage man can be making $100,000 a year right now between paying overtime. They don't have enough people. It's why your garbage, at least around here, our garbage may or may not be picked up on the day it's supposed to be. Usually it's a day or two later. And so this is the golden age of mid-20 somethings, especially if you're somebody who doesn't have a family already. Like if you're a freewheeling individual, you should be making bank right now.
Oh yeah.
And the problem is we've got so many young people who don't want to work because again, they've been told your happiness is what matters. Your subjective concept of happiness, not being a productive member of society and then being happy when you're not at work, right? I mean, I want you to be happy at work, right? But in the end, it's a job, right? Mm-hmm. And you ask the question, what can we do?
Yeah.
I think that a legitimate area where government can interact, because again, these are government schools, right? Is fostering an environment and encouraging programs where, to your point with your stepson, where technical colleges are partnering with high schools and educational groups, and this is happening in a lot of places, and I'm happy to see it. We need to do more to encourage it, more to streamline it, and more to make it available to more students. Where if you're a senior in high school, a junior or senior in high school, and you've got your basic history classes taken care of, your science classes taken care of, you've gone through math, you've got your 2 years of English, French, or Japanese, whichever your school might offer, now you start working. You start learning the trade. You start doing an apprenticeship. And so by the time you hit 18, you have some idea of what you want to do, and you're already started down that career path. With the baby boomers getting, retiring and needing more and more medical care and the rest of it, with millennials not having babies the way that generations before them had or used to,
correct.
We're going to have to start thinking outside the box on how we keep this society moving, right? And how we keep men and women who produce things and actually kind of make our society work at a very granular level, how we encourage that. And so basically, how do we end up with more mechanics and fewer creative writing degrees?
Right. Well, and I think you can still have your creative writing. And that's one of the things I really love about the power of the internet. Like there's things like Skillshare, Udemy. There's so much you can learn, micro certifications, where it's like, okay, spend the $500-600 on this one course, right? And you're certified and you're ready to rock. Meanwhile, if you want to do creative writing, by all means, God bless you. Start writing away. Be creative. You don't need anyone to teach you that. I mean, the greatest writers in the history of the world, what do? They picked up the pen and paper, or the quill and the parchment, whatever it was at that time.
And to be clear, I'm not denigrating a creative writing degree. I'm just
right.
It has its place. I'm just saying that we shouldn't continue to default to pushing students into a 4-year degree in the liberal arts that the marketplace just doesn't really have a need or a demand for.
Right.
right? And again, getting back to your question of what can government do, I think things like what Governor Walker, I think, pushed, where you don't have to have a certificate to teach shop or to
Yes.
teach, flight, or to teach accounting at the high school level. I mean, if you're a CPA and you're relatively capable of speaking to people, you can take a group of high school seniors and teach them accounting.
Correct.
I mean, again, husband, father, and grandson of teachers. I'm not denigrating teaching in any way, shape, or form, but there is a point at which having knowledge of the skill almost by definition transfers into your ability to share that knowledge with someone else. It works in college. So why is it that as a freshman in college, all of a sudden a teaching certificate isn't necessary, but it is as a senior in high school, right? I mean, they're literally the same people. So it's things like that that can be done to encourage out of the box thinking, to get people into classrooms that can provide the knowledge base to students, to hopefully steer them into a direction where it fits their abilities and their personality and skill set, but also fits a need in the marketplace.
Right. Well, I think that's so important. Take a look at the need of the marketplace, take a look and teach people, find out what their abilities are, what their interests are, and see what you can do to hone that in there. Because I think, and this ties into everything we talked about. We don't want to do touchy-feely. We want to do, if we're touchy-feely anything, we're touchy-feeling, how does this machine work? We're doing hands-on application, real-world things. And I think if you focus on that cultural rot that you have that seems to permeate almost everything, well, that starts kind of going away once you have people that are like, yeah, I took apart that engine, I learned how it worked, and I put it back together. That sense of pride.
Yeah. Yep.
Miss those days.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a middle-class American. I mean, just solidly middle-class, man. And we're the ones that always pay the price for bad policies and bad decisions.
True.
Those who are truly in poverty, we don't allow to starve in this country. I mean, if you're starving, it usually has something to do with an addiction of some sort or a mental health issue.
Correct.
And and for the wealthy, which again, I love wealthy people, man. I've never been employed by a poor person. Love wealthy people. I love all people. But I'm just saying, I'm not a classist. Okay, I don't have anything. It's for them, it's usually a matter of how many zeros are in the bank account. It's the middle class that always ends up paying the price for bad policy decisions and liberal decisions. And I'm just tired of it. I'm just tired of seeing, middle America just kind of tromped on by liberalism and by Marxism and these horrible economic decisions made by people like Joe Biden and Tony Evers.
Right.
And like I say, that's what finally I've known it forever, but the last 2 years and just the speed with which liberalism moved pushed me in the back to get involved at the election level, to finally run for office. And like I say, I don't make any promises other than that I will take my worldview that I sincerely hold. And I would encourage anyone, find me on Facebook, find my personal page. You'll see 15 years of me advocating for liberty and for a constitutional worldview. This is not a campaign speech. This is literally who I am and what I believe and always have.
Well, and I want to interject real quick here because I think it's very important because we've talked on a couple of different occasions, and obviously watched some of your live videos. And yes, this is what Brian's telling you here. This is 100% legitimate. Whether you're having a one-on-one conversation, you're seeing him on the campaign trail, this is the real deal here.
Yeah, it is. It's who I am. It's what I believe. I don't want the job bad enough to lie to anybody. I mean, the truth matters, and I just think that liberty matters, and that good government, limited government, maximum power and money with the people is going to be the solution to what ails us.
Right.
So that's when I'm going to take to Madison with me. I'm going to seek to partner with those who see the world in a similar way. And again, I'm not going to be disagreeable. I like to think I'm a nice guy. People that disagree with me are not my enemies. They're just people who disagree with me.
Right.
And so I'm not going to be a bull in the china shop. I've never insulted anyone to agreeing with me, and I'm not going to start trying now. Um, I'm going to try and use the power of persuasion and the truth, what I think is the truth of a constitutional worldview, and see if we can't bring enough people on board here in Wisconsin to start moving the needle back in the right direction, and then just slowly chip away at it, just as the left has been doing to our liberties since FDR, since 1913.
Right. Well, I think to your point earlier, they play the long game. And the problems that we're facing didn't happen overnight, although COVID certainly did exacerbate them from the criminal standpoint, from the mental health perspective to the economic front. And in order for that to turn around, we have to start now. And it starts with individuals like yourself, like everyone else that's running. I mean, we got some great candidates up and down the ticket. I love to say I'm going to sit here and endorse everybody, but that doesn't really work. But in our last couple moments here, I want to hand it over to you, and I'm going to give you the full screen because I want you to give your last minute pitch here. Because again, we are 29, might as well say 28 at this point, days from August 9th. Primary day is right around the corner, and I know you guys have been putting in a lot of work. You've been putting in a lot of miles, knocking on doors. That's a great tan that you're rocking right now. Beautiful day out here in Wisconsin, minus the rain. But yeah, I'm going to hand that over to you because, again, this is about you, and I want to make sure that we get your message out there because, the people of Wisconsin, as I tell everybody, the people of Wisconsin deserve better than what we have right now, and it starts with this election cycle.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, look, if you live in the 23rd State Senate District, I'm just asking for your vote on August 9th. Look, the beautiful thing about a Republican primary is a Republican wins, okay? I don't have bad things to say about my competitors in this race. I just think that I am better situated to really battle government and to pursue liberty for the people. I think that my worldview and my experience are just going to make me more effective at that down in Madison for the next 4 years as a state senator. I want to be very clear that we Republicans, we conservatives need to remember where our opponents are, and they're to the left of us. They are not to the right of us. So if I lose on August 9th, I don't think I am, or I wouldn't keep doing this. But if I were to lose on August 9th, the moment the results are in, I will take my sign out of my yard and put whoever beats me sign in my yard. We have got to remember that we are going to hang together or hang separately. The we conservatives must remember that the enemy is the liberal left and those who are seeking to destroy our state and destroy our nation. So I ask for your vote on August 9th because I think that I will be the most effective person in this race to pursue liberty and to defend your freedoms. And if you've got any questions, you can find more information about me at votewestrate.com. You can also find me on Facebook, both my personal and campaign page. And if you don't live in the 23rd Senate District, I can always use a donation or a volunteer hour. You can reach me through my website again to sign up to get a yard sign or to tell me how else you might be willing to help. But God bless you all. God bless the state of Wisconsin. And let's just remember that we have to hang together here. And together we will beat Tony Evers this cycle. And in 2 years, we will get rid of Joe Biden. And we will continue to pursue the American excellence we all grew up with.
Brian, I want to thank you very much for joining me here on this podcast because I'm very and to have you come on here, I really do appreciate that. And I really, really appreciate it because I think in the end, it is so much bigger than the individual. At the we want a better now. And I really think that your message of that is needed to be heard.
I appreciate that. Yeah, look, this is not about any individual. This is about liberty and the defense about, and we have got to come together as conservatives after the primary and run full tilt again.
100%. Brian, I want to once again, like I said, thank you very much for joining in here tonight.
Yeah. Oh, and one other thing, there's no Democrat in my race. So whoever
Oh,
wins the primary, whoever, if you're thinking, man, this Westrate guy, he's just too conservative, he can't win a general. There's no general.
awesome. Well, again, thank you very much, Brian. And again, if you ever let me know, I'm always willing to have you back on.
Ditto, my friend. Anything I can do to help the cause, I'm there.
All right, guys, that was Brian Westrate, and he's running for the state senatorial district there to say. And I think, like you said, at the end of the day, this is bigger than me. This is the conservative message, the conservative movement that we want to advance. We want to make sure Wisconsin. So guys, thank you very much for joining in here tonight. Stay tuned because we will have more guests coming on here. Got a few shows lined up this week as well as next. And if you guys know any other folks that are running for office or currently sitting in a legislative seat or assembly or wherever, please have them reach out to me. Definitely like to have these conversations and advance the message of conservatism. So until next time, good night. God bless you. God bless the state of Wisconsin. God bless America. I'm out.